Hello, beautiful people of the internet. Thank you very much for joining us again on the Flat Back 3. My name is Toby Wellington. I'm joined by the beautiful George Turner to talk about the film that you are seeing the trailer for as we speak, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, set to come out this Wednesday, the 3rd of May in the UK. And it is the final one of the Guardians trilogy. George, how are you feeling about seeing the Guardians for one last time?
I know. I'm feeling sad, feeling emotional about this. I think watching the trailer with the music, well, I watched it before we came on today, just like really hits the nerve, really
Mm.
heightens and brings out all the sad emotions. So I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm also quite sad about watching it as well because I know something bad's going to happen.
I am very wary of getting hooked on trailers for Marvel and the music they use because Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania looked good and the music was
Mm,
good in those trailers. So that makes me very nervous that we might get
mm,
convinced that something's going to be good when it's not. Um,
mhm.
but I have to say that I am more enthusiastic about this film than I have been for anything else Marvel have brought out since Endgame, except Spider-Man: No Way Home,
Mhm.
because they've confirmed that it's the end of the trilogy. So they have to really pay off the Guardians story that we've seen for the last three movies, including this one, of course. Guardians 1 and Guardians 2 are two of the most well-received movies in the MCU. So this is the final beat of that story. What are you looking forward to seeing the most in this one, or the least, in fact?
Hmm. I think one thing I picked up on the trailer is that Groot's got big, hasn't he?
Yeah, well,
He's
it's
quite.
Teenage Groot. I take it you didn't watch the Christmas special because he was big in that as well.
Oh, I did. Yeah, it's a good point actually. I think just rewatching the trailer this morning, I thought, oh, he's got quite big, but he's quite broad. And one question I had is he the same Groot as in the first movie, or is he a different person slash tree now?
It it's I can't ever remember. It's technically the same group, but a slightly different one. Is basically the thing I'm going to say. But I don't, it's still the Groot that we've grown to love and accept in our storyline. It's still Groot. That's the main thing.
Yeah, yeah. Some interesting new characters coming in as well. You got the High Evolutionary, which I don't really know much about, and Adam Warlock as well. I don't really know much about those two characters, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so well, the High Evolutionary is going to be a really interesting villain. The name of the actor is like I don't want to say it wrong. It's like Chukwudi Iwuji, and that's not me trying to be stupid. That's genuinely my best pronunciation of his name. Who's a fantastic actor, and the High Evolutionary is a really interesting character that they've decided to go with as well, especially because it links so directly to the Guardians in terms of like Rocket specifically. Obviously, this is where Rocket came from. We see that in the trailer as we're sort of talking over this at the same time. Um, and the High Evolutionary is very much a character who is like purely evil, in that the guy is basically responsible for the creation of multiple creatures. Like he tears things apart, rebuilds them to try and make the perfect species. Is probably the best way to describe him. And obviously, from the looks of the trailer, it looks like that is going to be the main villain throughout, with Adam Warlock also getting involved, who of course um, is the product of the Gold people from Guardians 2, creating something to take down the Guardians of the Galaxy, like the perfect human being, basically. Now, in the comics, like Adam Warlock is an extremely powerful character who has one of the Infinity Stones in his forehead, like much like Vision does for a long period. He doesn't in this, obviously, and is played by Will Poulter. Is that his name? I know it's Poulter is his surname. Who again is a really good actor and has really sort of come of age in the last sort of 5 to 6 years. And I'm really excited to see what he does. Adam Warlock's really heavily involved with the Avengers and the defeating of Thanos in the comics and stuff like that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they fold him into the MCU. But if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'm
Mhm.
really interested to see how they balance this movie, because this is it. This is the end of the
Mm.
Guardian. And I was thinking about this morning. this is basically the end of the original MCU in a way,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
you've lost Iron Man, lost Captain America, we've lost so many major characters. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, Hawkeye's being phased out, Vision, Wanda, etc. Doctor Strange is not the character he was. Thor, I don't know how much more we're going to see going forward. Tom Holland's Spider-Man, we never know anything about because Sony still own the rights to Spider-Man. The Guardians, some of them might still be around, but as a team are going to be gone after this. And this is the end of the MCU as we know it, I think.
Mm.
And as we've discussed a lot, and this is my biggest sort of talking point for today, is that this won't save Marvel, even if this is a massive success, because the Guardians story has always been slightly separate to the main timeline that we've seen in the MCU. They showed up almost in Infinity War when they found the Asgardian ship after it had been blown up, and obviously then subsequently saved Thor. And obviously they were linked to the story with Gamora, Nebula, Thanos, etc., but they were never directly in the main MCU storyline in terms of interacting with other characters from the MCU. So I'm curious to see whether this is something. I'm rambling a bit, so I do apologize, but I'm curious to see whether, even if this is successful, it links in any way to the ongoing storyline, which is in theory Kang the Conqueror.
Mm. I think we could see Kang. We might see him at the end, maybe at like the post-credit scene.
But
But like
doing
you
what
said, I feel like
related to the Guardians? Doing what though?
I don't know. Well, he's very. It could be one of his variants. Just another one of those post-credit scenes that we had in Ant-Man, where we had all those variations. We might see him in
Yeah,
one of those variations.
but then my point, so this is my point, is doing what that relates to the Guardians. The Guardians are literally flying around space trying to be the Guardians of the galaxy, whilst Kang is trying to take over the multiverse. And this is what I mean with like the MCU as a whole. The Guardians have always been kept slightly separate from the main story that's happening. So obviously we saw like Civil War and the development of the Sokovia Accords and things like that, Age of Ultron, etc., taking place with our main cast of characters. And then you had the Guardians, which was completely separate, and then they came together for literally 2 movies, and then they've gone separately again. Even like they've ditched Thor, which was, Guardians was supposed to kick off phase 4, and he was supposed to be part of this movie. He's not going to be by the looks of it. So having Kang in this movie would almost be like, well, how and why? Because it doesn't
Yeah.
link very well. Because if you think about this universe's Kang, the timeline's Kang, you would assume that he wouldn't necessarily show up in the Guardians movie if he was going to show up anywhere, seeing as they literally, the Stadium of Kangs turned their concentration to the Avengers and Earth at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So I think this might be a self-contained story, but that's why I think this is not going to help Marvel and Marvel's reputation at the moment, regardless of how successful this movie is, because that's the one thing. I think this movie is going to do really well because people care about the Guardians of the Galaxy, but they just don't care about the Marvel cinematic universe as much anymore.
Yeah, I've heard some good things from. They had the what do they call it? Not launch night, but like the
Test
red
screenings?
carpet evening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, first screenings. I've heard some good reviews from that.
Mm.
So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm really excited, but as you said, it might not help Marvel in the long term. It might help people get booked on the initial couple of films or programs, because yeah, I guess it's kind of like a last chance saloon for some people, maybe. But yeah, as you said, it is sort of like the ending of the MCU phase 1 on the original characters with this film.
Yeah. I just think that whatever happened, this movie could make 500-600 million, 700 million worldwide, and like Marvel will take that as a big win, but overall it's not something that's going to change people's perception of Marvel, in that
Mm,
Marvel at the minute are putting out dud after dud, the same as Star Wars. And if Guardians breaks that trend, that's not necessarily down to the quality of Marvel's movies all of a sudden coming back. It's the quality of a director that you've let go to DC doing the final part of a story that they are actually treating like a finale. And we saw then that the last finale they had was Endgame, and it was absolutely phenomenal.
mm,
So my point is just that it just in an overall, Marvel's reputation won't be fixed, salvaged, or improved as a result of this movie, regardless. Because
mm.
let's talk about the main thing. This is the end of the story. Who do you think we're going to lose?
Oh, such a big question, isn't it?
Because I think
I think
if I might go
go on.
first, just very quickly, I think Rocket's gone, and that is going to be a tearjerker. I think
Mm,
that Drax is gone. Dave Bautista said he's done, so you might as well
yeah.
kill him off rather than leaving him drifting around somewhere. I think they might kill off Gamora because Zoe Saldana's come out this week and said that she's done with the MCU, but would be
Oh, right.
interested in doing something maybe in the future. So I would potentially, I mean, in an ideal world, I would see most of the Guardians be killed off, and then maybe
Mm,
Star Lord, Groot survive, and Nebula maybe, and go off and do some stuff in the future with the Guardians. But yeah, I think for Rocket and Drax, it's the definite end, and I think that Rocket, as the character who's sort of kept his distance emotionally, and you know, um, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess emotionally is the only word. Like he's kept himself emotionally distant from the rest of the Guardians to sacrifice himself to save the rest of them might be the perfect way
yeah.
to end things. But yeah, what do you think? What do you think? Obviously, this is going to be an
I,
emotional movie. It is very much the end of the story.
yeah, I agree with you. I think Drax is. I think it's the last time we're going to see him. I think he might be killed off. But I don't know about Rocket. I feel like if Rocket does go, I think Groot goes as well. And so I don't think we'll see
Mm.
one or the other in future films because they've been such a double act up to this point. So, and I think from Marvel's point of view, although this isn't going to be the same group of Guardians in the future films or future episodes, sorry, TV series, whatever, they've got to think about how they're going to shape that group again in the future. So I don't think you can have, yeah,
Well,
one
do
without
they
the
though?
other.
Do you have to have, or do you even have Guardians of the Galaxy going forward?
Hmm. Well,
Because
I
you've
think
got
they've come out and said, haven't they? I think Kevin Feige has come out and said there will be another Guardians in the future, but not necessarily this group.
well,
I
let me
think.
do a quick Google to find out. Well, there are rumors that this is, or I've just seen like there are people that are saying this is one of the best Marvel movies ever.
Hmm.
But at the same time, there are always things that say stuff like people were saying Ant-Man and the Wasp was 5 stars, and people were saying that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was one of the most creative movies of all time, and they were both absolutely horrific. And that's the other thing I think with this movie that I'm holding out hope that they will treat this as an ending and they will treat this as a respectful step and chapter in this story is that James Gunn is also saying his goodbye to the MCU because he's taken over the DCU, but this is a
Hmm.
massive thing for him as well to show that he can really round off what is being arguably the best trilogy within the MCU. I don't know. I personally absolutely love Spider-Man movies. I didn't like the one with Mysterio as much. Then the Thor movies, there's a dud in them. Well, there's actually the first and second one are not so good. Fourth one's horrendous. You got the Captain America movies. The first one, a lot of people don't like. The Iron Man movies, a lot of people don't like too. Whereas everyone loves Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. Obviously, you have your preference one over the other, but it doesn't necessarily get a lot of flack from anyone. So it's interesting. Um, just really quickly, I'll share my screen. Hopefully, it will share soon-ish.
Yeah,
Can you see that?
you good. Hmm.
So Screen Rant are reporting that there are no official plans for a fourth one, but they've basically come out and said never say never,
Hmm.
which to me basically says that there won't be a fourth movie unless they're absolutely desperate. Um, there's not
Do you
much
think there's
else
a
on here.
scenario? Sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, do you think it's a scenario when if that they all die?
No, I don't think that they are brave enough to do it, and I don't think that they would be effective enough to do that well. And if you kill them all in one go, you lose the emotional impact of losing some of them individually. I think.
Mm.
I think that if you, the thing is, like, as an audience member, you would react emotionally, but like if you think back to Endgame when Tony Stark died, it was the emotional reaction of other characters that then heightened your emotion even
Yeah, yeah,
further.
that's true.
So I think if
Mm.
you just go boom explosion all dead, and you could kill them one by one, but then if you have whoever the last one is, say it is Peter Quill, and then he dies in some heroic thing, like it's not to save anyone necessarily that he really cares about. It would, I just feel like they would take away the emotional investment and reaction in that decision being made if they were to kill them all. So I think two survive. And I think that I
Mm.
don't think they'll kill Chris Pratt because I think that they know
No,
Chris
I
Pratt
don't
is
think so.
too big an A-list name that they can get back in the
Mm.
future to try and get people in the cinema. Especially if you think about the fact that they've cycled through so many A-list actors in the MCU at this point that they haven't got many left for future roles. So
No.
if they can bring Star-Lord back to feature in something, I'm sure they will. Um, and that's why I also think they'll keep Groot around, because I think that Groot specifically, you don't need a voice actor of, like, you don't need Vin Diesel to play Groot is essentially what I'm trying to
Mm.
say. Um, and you can just have different versions of Groot on and on and on.
Mm.
So yeah, but I think this story is very much to see out some of these characters more than it is to continue the MCU story, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Um, I'm almost sure this might be only the third movie to ever make me cry, the second Marvel movie. So we'll see. You know, I'm really keen to see what they do with Rocket because this is very much being framed as a Rocket's story as well.
Mm. What character's the like the ferret looking thing? He like, or was it like a weasel or
Otter.
an otter?
Yeah, it's that's oh god, is it Layla? Oh god, I'm gonna have to Google that. Um,
So I know we see Cosmo in the latest trailer, but then I didn't know what the otter was all
Lila.
about. Oh,
Yeah, it's Lila. So Lila's like
right.
Groot's. I don't know if it's like his girlfriend or just like best friend, but like as part of the experiment, that is sort of like
I
as part
see.
of the evolutionaries experiments, that is one of the other creatures that's in there. Have you seen the minute and a half clip of him and three other creatures, one a walrus and one a rabbit, as well as Lila the otter?
No,
Oh,
I
it's
haven't seen
really
that.
sweet where they're picking their names whilst they're in their cages being experimented on, and like it's very
Mm.
sweet. And I think that this might be quite a harrowing movie as well.
Mm.
Um, because in that trailer which we showed at the start of the recording, there's the scene where there's blood dripping off a scalpel and Peter Quill is like screaming with test tubes all around him and like things, and that might be Rocket's death scene.
Mm.
So I'm very
God.
wary. It's
Yeah.
going to be an emotionally charged one, I think.
Do you think Peter and Gamora are going to get back together, or do you think that story's dead?
I think they'll be reunited in this movie, but I think they'll take Gamora away from him again, and that's why he'll disappear rather than like going off into the sunset as a hero or anything like that. I think they'll save the day and he'll be so distraught that he sort of takes himself into some backwater planet and disappears for a long time to potentially come back in the future, but never be guaranteed.
Mm.
It's also interesting. I guess the biggest question for me, and I know this is something that you won't have as much knowledge on or be able to answer, is but they're bringing Adam Warlock into this story, which makes complete sense because he was introduced to the MCU to go and deal with the Guardians of the Galaxy. But
Mm.
you would assume that he's going to help the Guardians defeat the High Evolutionary. Where does he go after this? Because you've got the Guardians of the Galaxy potentially being stripped down to one, two, even maybe three at a stretch members left. But they're, like we've said, they're not directly connected to the other members of the MCU. So how do
Mm.
we get Adam Warlock into the MCU going forward?
maybe that's in that character's favor or Marvel's favor as well,
Mm.
in that sort of light. So they know the Guardians are a separate story in a sort of in that way. So maybe Adam Warlock can just be in that storyline as well, and not introduced to the main storyline. Maybe.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't bring him in. Do you know what I mean? Like, why would you bring him in
Mm,
just to have him in
be
one
in one
movie?
film.
And he's such a big important character in the comics that you can't just have him appear and he's so powerful as well. You can't just have him appear for one movie and then just not come back. But then they've done that with Vision. Like, where's White Vision? No one knows.
No, it's true.
And I don't
So
think they know either. Marvel bosses can spin this any which way they want. The Guardians is not your creation, and it's not something that's going to change my view, and it's not going to change anyone else's view on
hmm,
the quality of the stuff that you're putting out.
yeah, I'm excited. I think I'm going to watch it next weekend. That's my plan.
So
Hopefully, I can
we
get
will be
Phoebe to watch it.
we'll be able to discuss it in next week's roundup then, which we'll quickly touch on in that from next week, we will be doing a weekly episode on a Sunday afternoon evening that will release on Sunday night for you to watch the following week. We'll still be doing reviews, previews, and discussions on topics like movies, TV shows, games, etc. in the week. But every Sunday, you can expect a release of our new weekly series called the Flatback Threes Extra Time, where we'll discuss everything that's happened in the week prior, which will be about an hour long. So we'll probably talk about Guardians 3 in that, and then maybe do a full review about the movie in more depth, which can be a bit more spoilery
Hmm.
for anyone that is interested. But for now, that's been our preview of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It's fair to say we're both very excited, but very nervous as well about what's going to happen to our beloved Guardians. Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you soon.